Okay, now listen, I know that this is an insanely hot take. This is probably going to be one of the most unpopular opinions I have ever had on this channel. Shocking, I know. I genuinely believe that Fortnite has never had a truly bad season. And if you hear me out, you might actually begin to agree with me just a little bit. Now let me make this clear. It doesn't mean that Epic Games is perfect. It doesn't mean that Fortnite hasn't made bad mistakes. And it doesn't mean that Fortnite hasn't had some weak seasons. However, to say that there are some bad ones, I don't know if we can truly say that about Fortnite at its core. The funny thing is, as we progress through this topic, you're going to see where I disagree with Epic Games' approach to different seasons quite a bit, but I also am starting to see a pattern within the community for why certain seasons are disliked, and some of these reasons I think are pretty obvious, but the community is somewhat blinded by their rage for certain seasons as to why they actually don't like them. But before we get into any of that, I think it's important that each one of us recognizes that we have a bias when it comes to playing and evaluating what we think is good within Fortnite. This is a concept that I got into great detail within a previous video, but basically, Fortnite is broken into two camps, which is builds and zero builds, and underneath that are all the different ways in which we choose to play Fortnite. Are you a controller or a KBM player? Are you on console or PC? Are you a competitive player or a casual player? You can pretty much mix and match any one of those things, and each one of them is a valid experience under the umbrella of Fortnite. Because of how you choose to play the game, it can give you a completely different perspective on how this game works, as opposed to someone who plays a completely different mode or way than you do. For example, as a casual zero builds controller player on PC, I'm going to have a completely different experience than the guy that only plays Fortnite on the weekends to escape from work or school, or from the person that is literally trying to become the next FNCS champion. Just right there, I've given 3 different examples of how people can enjoy and perceive this game. And you can understand how people, depending on how they choose to play Fortnite, can have a completely different experience from one another. This is something that I really came to understand after debating Rylak and going through the whole comp versus casual civil war that we had a couple months ago. The experience of competitive players is so much different than casual players, and to evaluate those two things side by side like they're the same thing is just not fair to either group. Another thing that I've come to realize is that certain season themes cater towards a specific playstyle more. So for example, I feel like Wrecked was better for zero builds, and I feel like this season is better for builds players. Once again, how you choose to play Fortnite will shape your perception and your experience of what you think is good in the game. Another thing that I don't think people ask themselves is, why do you play Fortnite? For me, I'm trying to spend time with friends and family. I'm also trying to see how many kills I can get while also trying to win the game. And of course, I'm trying to entertain my audience. But let's say you're not a content creator and you're just trying to play the game to unwind and have fun by yourself. Well, that's going to give you a completely different perspective than mine. The point that I'm trying to get here with all of this is that the reason why you play Fortnite and how you choose to play Fortnite is going to drastically shape your perception of what you think this game is supposed to be. Now, because of all these different ways to play the game, there's something that I think the Fortnite community needs to understand that they really have a hard time grasping. And to be fair, this is something that took me a few years to understand as well. Just because you don't like something doesn't make it bad. For example, this season to me has solidified that I don't think I like Marvel seasons that much. It doesn't mean that I haven't had any fun and that the core gameplay isn't good. It's just that I don't enjoy this concept as much as I do Fortnite's original ideas. And something that I preach on this channel for, I think, well over 2 years now is that Fortnite is always at its best when it focuses on its own original concepts. The most fun seasons I ever play are when Fortnite is coming up with some crazy out-of-the-box idea that is based upon their own original IP or concept, not relying on a collab or another licensed IP in order to make the game interesting. Now, with that being said, that doesn't mean that I don't want collabs inside the game, and it also doesn't mean I don't want seasons based around collabs. I just know what I like from Fortnite more. I can see the utility in it, even if it's not for me. I also think Fortnite's been putting in a lot of work to try to find new ways to appease a greater audience of people. For example, we know that's what the purpose of the Find It in Fortnite model was, but specifically, when we're looking at Battle Royale, I think that's the function of reload. If you want the more grounded gunplay-based version of Fortnite without any crazy superpowers or cars, you're gonna play reload. At least until Fortnite creates a new season around the BR that is more grounded with more focus on gunplay. But that's the great thing. If you get bored of pubs, you could always play something like reload. And if you don't like reload, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe go play something else that's not Fortnite. The funny thing is, I believe a lot of Fortnite players think that just because they're not playing a season a lot, that means the game must be dead or it must be dying. Like Fortnite is losing its charm because you're currently not having fun. Like, because you hate Wrecked, objectively, this is the worst season ever and everyone on the planet must hate it and no one likes it, and this is a terrible decision by Epic Games. How dare they? Like, if the new season of Fortnite isn't wanting to make you play 8 days a week, 27 hours a day, then clearly there's something wrong with the game. I don't want to play Fortnite every single waking hour of my life, so therefore the game must be dead and they must be losing their touch. And see, the thing is, for people that have that mentality, it makes me wonder, why do you need to play a video game every day in order for it to be good? Like, maybe it's healthy that you're feeling a little burnt out with the game. Like, maybe it's a good thing that you just don't want to play it this season. Listen, for all my new Fortnite players, I'm gonna put you on the game, and for my OGs, I want you to chime in on this as well. I want to know your guys' opinion, but I think that once you played Fortnite for about a year and a half, you pretty much understand the meta or the rhythm of how this game works. You got a chapter and a half under your belt, you see what they do with each season, you kind of see what they're doing with season themes, you've gotten used to the core gameplay loop: loot, shoot guns, run from storm, fight it out, reboot a teammate, get rebooted, win. By this point, you've done it hundreds of times, and you're probably going to get bored. I would argue, even when the game is at its best, it can still feel stale to you because it's just more of the same thing that you've already done, even when they put a new spin on it. And here's the other thing: if you're not choosing to interact with Fortnite in a new way, like you're only gonna play zero builds forever, and that's the only mode, you're never gonna play builds, you're never gonna play reload, you're never gonna play competitive, you're only going to play pubs, zero builds, and that's it, the game is going to just completely wear away at your mind. It's not going to hold your attention. This also kind of ties into an argument I make about Fortnite players being spoiled. See, with most normal video games, they do get boring after a few months, and that's normal. Like, no one's sitting here complaining about Five Nights at Freddy's 1 because, the gameplay loop is exactly the same as it was like 5 years ago when the game came out or whatever. And it's obvious why that one version of the game is what it is, and anytime you want to go back and revisit that version of FNAF, you can do that. But of course, Fortnite is different. Not only can you not go back to the original version of Fortnite or your favorite version of it, but you've also been conditioned to treating Fortnite different because it's constantly reinventing itself every 2 months. And this has proven to be a blessing and a curse. Although we get a fresh remixed take on the classic BR gameplay loop, we also have to create something that gets further away from the original style of the game as time moves on. If Epic didn't do that, the game wouldn't attract new players and the game wouldn't feel fresh. But see, that goes back to my original point, which is that the longer you play Fortnite, the more seasons you have to compare to the current one. And chances are, over time, Epic Games will release a concept or a season that you don't like. But does that mean that it's inherently bad? There's something else that's very important that I want everybody to keep in mind. Every Fortnite season is someone's first season. And because of that, I think there's enough good intrinsic qualities in the game to get new players hooked on it to where they want to play future seasons. I want you to think about your personal most hated seasons of all time. Now I want you to think about how long you'd been playing Fortnite up to that point. Now I want you to look at that season from the perspective of someone who has never played Fortnite before or didn't have much exposure to it. They're going into the game with a blank slate. For example, there's a gentleman whose name escapes me that comments on my videos quite regularly that says, Primal was my first season, and he absolutely loved it. I can understand why if Primal was your first Fortnite season ever, you would be over the moon for that gameplay loop. But for someone like me, who at that time I think had been playing Fortnite for about 3 years, 3.5 years, I was not feeling that season. This is one of the reasons why I say Fortnite doesn't have bad seasons. There are people that have played Fortnite for the first time during Wrecked and absolutely loved it. So much so that they're probably playing this Marvel season now. The same goes for Primal, Season X, and Wilds. I have talked to so many of these people in the past in my comment section, and if you're one of these people, I want you to leave a comment right now because I'm curious, what attracted you to Fortnite, and also, what made you stick around? And for everybody else listening, now is the time to subscribe to the video, and if you want to leave me an angry comment, feel free to do so as well. I love y'all, even the ones that get salty in the comment section. Now let's address some of the counter arguments that might pop up. Although it's true that Fortnite isn't bad just because you don't like it, it's also true that a bunch of people liking a season doesn't make it good either. But I want you to remember something. I'm not arguing that a season's good just because a bunch of people like it. I'm saying that there's enough good intrinsic qualities within Fortnite, regardless of the season, to get new people attached to it. And because of this, I don't believe that Fortnite could be bad at its core. If it was, those people wouldn't continue to play on for future seasons. But that does beg the question, if Fortnite hasn't previously had a bad season, do I believe that Fortnite could potentially have one in the future? I 100% believe that it's possible, and I do think on a couple of occasions we may have even gotten close. But I also believe in order for that to happen, Fortnite would have to do something incredibly drastic to the game. For example, I think if Fortnite did something like turn itself into a fighting game for a season, like Dragon Ball Z or Street Fighter, Tekken, I think that would be an objectively bad idea. Even if the game was in a battle royale setting, and although that sounds incredibly interesting, I would rather see that as an LTM than I would take the place of weapon gameplay in the main BR. Now, some people would argue, well, that's what happened with Wrecked, and I will address that in a moment, but I think Wrecked you can actually give a bit more leeway to than what I just mentioned. Even though car gameplay was at the core of that season, weapon gameplay still had a huge factor in how well you did, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. Another thing that I think would ruin Fortnite is that if it was just completely unplayable, like if you couldn't load into the game and actually play around without it crashing or lagging out. Basically, Fortnite would have to pull a Cyberpunk and just make the game literally unplayable. Or a season would just have so many rampant bugs that it wouldn't be worth playing at all. In essence, something that would have to interfere with the gameplay loop of whatever it is that Epic was trying to present for a season theme. Now, at this point in the video, some of you may be saying, Clark, you're absolutely delusional. There are just some seasons that the community has come together and voted are objectively bad. Like, people just objectively say, we do not like this. This is not a good thing for Fortnite. And to those people, I would say, well, let's look at some of those seasons. What are some of the seasons that people objectively just think are the worst in Fortnite history? Typically, when I hear people talk about bad seasons, it's Wrecked, Primal, Wilds, Vibin, Season X. For many of those, I will agree that these are typically some of the weaker seasons in Fortnite's history. Also, to be fair to Fortnite, after 31 seasons and 5 chapters, I think it's okay to have a few seasons that are a bit weaker than others. As a matter of fact, it's inevitable. There has to be a weakest link somewhere in a list of 31 seasons. And to continue this point even further, you can go on Fortnite.gg right now and look at the ranking of every Fortnite season that's ever come out. You can actually see what a lot of people in the community think are the worst seasons of all time. And what's interesting is that the majority of the ones that I mentioned are actually there on the bottom. But here's the kicker, and this is what I was alluding to at the start of the video. When you look at these seasons, there is a clear pattern that the Fortnite community is ignoring about each and every one of them. Notice how the majority of these seasons are late into a chapter's lifespan. It's either at the midway point or the last season of a chapter. Now remember what I said earlier, the longer you play Fortnite, the more you get used to its play pattern. Well, normally by the end of the chapter, the player base is tired of the play pattern and is looking for something new. Now, to be fair to a lot of your guys' perspective, I do believe that certain play patterns can overstay their welcome. Now, it doesn't mean that the play pattern is necessarily bad, it's just not strong enough to stay for the length of an entire chapter. Or maybe it's not well executed enough. For example, I would strongly argue that Chapter 5 is the weakest chapter in Fortnite history. It doesn't mean that it wasn't fun, it doesn't mean that it didn't have some cool ideas and additions to the game, but I don't think that this chapter was what Fortnite needed, especially after it returning to OG for a month. I also don't think that changes to movement were necessary, even though I'm used to them now. And although it's improved over time, I'm not the biggest fan of this map, and I think that it strayed too far from what I like from Fortnite for its level design. I also do not like how bullet drop or weapon attachments work this chapter. That one I know is a hot topic, but I just don't think that it's been well executed in Fortnite. Doesn't mean that it couldn't work, but as it works right now, I don't think it's a suitable replacement for hitscan. Now, to make it clear, I'm not mad at Epic Games for experimenting with these things. I think it's good that they're trying to continue to freshen up the game, even for a new audience. This is why I cringe at the argument, this doesn't belong in Fortnite. I don't know if we can reasonably say that at this point. We've gotten such a wide variety of concepts and ideas in this game, and Epic has figured out a way to make pretty much all of them work. Doesn't mean I want them to be permanent changes to the game or in there all the time, but they are always playing with something new. Now, specifically, when it comes to Chapter 5, even though some of these concepts are cool, I just think I've played better versions of Fortnite. I also do think it's possible for Epic to stray too far away from Fortnite's core identity. This chapter, to me, didn't do that, but it was definitely skirting the line. I think that it was an overcorrection to make Fortnite appeal to a broader audience. What Epic needs to understand is that they can still do that while keeping the game in its roots that made it popular in the first place. Just due to the metaverse or collabs, but not by switching up some of the core gameplay mechanics of BR. And see, that's where I think the crux of a lot of these issues are when it comes to bad seasons, the core gameplay mechanics. Epic, especially in Chapter 5, has not kept those at the forefront of their mind. For example, as much as I loved Wrecked, I can agree that there were some huge missteps at the start of that season. However, I don't think it was a bad season conceptually, I just think the execution was mismanaged, especially for builds. Fortnite should never introduce items that make their core gameplay mechanics useless. I believe that if Epic had have gone into the development of Wrecked with the mindset of maintaining the integrity of their core gameplay, that season would have been so much better. And there are two things they could have brought in that would have solved a lot of the problems that we had in Wrecked. Specifically, armored walls and rocket launchers. Can you imagine if the initial counter to cars was players using metal walls to solidify their structures, that way people couldn't drive through or nitro them? Not to mention include rocket launchers that also would have done an insane amount of damage, as well as slowing vehicle momentum down. It would have made the season not only more fun, but more strategic, while bringing back some old gameplay items that hadn't been seen in a long time. I'm really glad that armored walls are back in Season 4, but I feel like it's one season too late from where they really would have been truly effective in Battle Royale. And if I'm being real with you guys, I think hit scan weapons would have made last season more fun. As much as bullet drop defenders want to keep these new weapons in the game, they just don't have the diversity of all the old hit scan weapons, nor do they feel, in my opinion, as good to use. When you have a season like Wreck that's absolute chaos, having a bunch of weapons that feel good to use at all times, regardless of what weapon type it is, would just make the gameplay more satisfying. At its core, the fun of any shooting game is going to be its weapons and loot pool. But look, in spite of my personal feelings of the loot pool and the controversy, I still had fun playing Wrecked. It felt like the most Fortnite season that we've had all of Chapter 5. I also think it's good for Fortnite to have a season that's either mid or insanely controversial once in a while. It throws everyone for a loop and resets the status quo. We can't always have seasons that are constantly getting better and better and better. You're not always going to get that dopamine kick when you play a new Fortnite season. Also, once again, keep in mind, every season is someone's first Fortnite season. Finally, I know a lot of people are going to want to argue that a season is bad when the player count is insanely low. However, when they say that, they're so fixated on the player count of BR, they're not paying attention to everything else around them. A lot of people aren't taking into consideration how many other things there are to play in Fortnite now, not to mention the natural bleed off of players the longer a chapter goes on. People are always going to drift away from Fortnite the longer a chapter progresses, especially if they keep reoccurring metas like medallions. Sometimes I think it'd be a good idea for Epic to have a huge meta shift in the middle of a chapter, which is pretty much what they were trying to do with Wrecked, but I just don't think that the execution was all there. Once again, we have to keep our core gameplay elements in mind. Now, outside of Chapter 5, what about some of the other seasons that people claim are objectively bad? Why did people hate those seasons? Was the hate justified? And most importantly, does it actually prove that Epic Games can design a bad Fortnite season? Briefly thinking back on a few of these, I think when it came to Season X, people like myself were just burned out with Fortnite at that time. The island had ran its course, the playstyle needed to evolve with new mechanics, and it just needed an overall refresh. It was 2 years of the same thing, and by Season X, we had just become too familiar with that formula. Primal, I think, was too slow for the people that had been used to faster-paced gameplay and better weapons. Not to mention, a lot of the changes to the map just felt lackluster. Not to mention, Chapter 2 felt like it was moving at a snail's pace already, with the first 2 seasons taking up 8 months. And to top that off, we weren't getting significant biome changes like we were in Chapter 1. Wilds, I think, started off strong but lost momentum after the first month. People weren't really getting what they wanted out of Fortnite. We wanted a better story, more live events, more exciting weapons, and we just got none of that. Not to mention, putting the jungle biome in the middle of the map, I think, was a mistake. If we're gonna have a jungle biome in the future, I think we should leave it to one corner of the map as opposed to putting it dead center. It just encouraged over excessive camping, and when it came to tournaments, it was a pain to go through, but I think over time, we ultimately adapted to it. It just didn't provide the most dynamic experience for gameplay. But I will say this, in spite of all these flaws that I've mentioned with these previous seasons, I still think that each and every single one of them were still really good. What people need to understand is just because something has flaws, it doesn't make it completely bad. Look at people in general. Every single one of us on this planet are flawed, but that doesn't mean that we don't have some traits about us that are inherently good. And for a lot of us, the good traits outweigh the bad. But most importantly, guys, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's this. When people are talking about how bad a Fortnite season is, it's because they're comparing it to their favorite season. They're comparing it to an era of Fortnite that is long gone that they probably have a lot of nostalgia for, and those feelings are completely valid. However, what we need to keep in mind is that every season is someone's first season, and those people are going to eventually have nostalgia for whatever your most hated Fortnite season is. And when another season comes down the road that you might like, that's closer to what you originally got attracted to Fortnite for, they might absolutely hate it. Fortnite has an insanely diverse player base, and even in its worst times, the game is still doing pretty well. But you know what? In spite of those flaws, there's enough good elements to keep people playing the game. And you know what? It's because of those flaws that I'm thankful that we have year-long chapters. And if you want to know more about why I love year-long chapters, make sure you click the video that's up on the screen right here. I love y'all, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.